What if I told you that a Bavarian well digger who never learned to read properly provided the most geographically specific description of World War III ever documented? And what if this same man predicted the exact month Germany would surrender in World War II, when every military expert believed the war would continue for years? This is the documented story of Alois Irlmaier, who lived from 1894 to 1959 in the small town of Freilassing, Bavaria. He worked as a simple Routengänger, a traditional water dowser, who located underground springs for local farmers, using nothing but wooden divining rods and an inexplicable intuition. But between 1947 and his death in 1959, this humble craftsman provided thousands of predictions that were systematically recorded by journalists, police investigators, researchers, and even American military intelligence officers who traveled to his small German village seeking answers. The primary documentation comes from Konrad Adelmeier's book, Blick in die Zukunft, Look into the Future, first published in 1950, containing direct transcripts of Irlmaier's interview. Additional verification exists in Stefan Bernds' comprehensive research, Alois Irlmaier, Ein Mann sagt, was sieht, A Man Says What He Sees, which includes official documents from German archives and witness testimonies spanning decades. Today we're examining the most terrifying prediction this simple farmer ever made. His detailed, step-by-step description of how World War III begins, where it starts, and why current global events match his vision with mathematical precision. To understand why Irlmaier's World War III predictions demand serious attention, we must first examine his documented accuracy during World War II. According to multiple verified sources, including Der Spiegel magazine's 1948 investigation, Irlmaier provided military predictions that defied every strategic analysis of the time. The magazine documented, during World War II, Alois Irlmaier managed to predict the impact point of bombs and could find missing persons. Local police records show that Irlmaier helped to find corpses and guilty people, uncovering and clarifying the dynamics of several crimes. The most dramatic example involves documented conversations from early 1945, when Nazi Germany still controlled significant territory and was fighting desperately on multiple fronts. Irlmaier told local residents with absolute certainty that the war will end before the summer harvest. When pressed for specifics, he stated that the Americans and Russians will meet at a river in Germany, and this meeting will end everything. These weren't vague predictions thrown out hoping something would stick. Irlmaier provided specific details that seemed impossible at the time. He told people exactly which areas would be bombed, which soldiers would return from the front, and which families would lose loved ones. The historical record proves his impossible accuracy. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, weeks before the summer harvest began. American and Soviet forces met at the Elbe River on April 25, 1945, exactly as Irlmaier had described months earlier when such a meeting seemed strategically unlikely. According to documented accounts preserved in multiple archives, hundreds of Americans visited Irlmaier after the war, requiring translators because he spoke only the local Bavarian dialect. These weren't curious tourists. They were military personnel investigating reports of a German civilian whose wartime predictions had proved impossibly accurate. What separates Irlmaier from other claimed prophets is the extensive police documentation of his abilities. Inspector Anton Huber of the Traunstein Police Department kept detailed records of cases where Irlmaier helped locate missing persons, solve crimes, and recover stolen property. One documented case involves a theft victim who came to Irlmaier after valuable pipes had been stolen from his property. According to the police report, Irlmaier told the man, "Go to X's barn. There's a wagon loaded with wood. When you unload the wood, you'll find your pipes hidden underneath." The theft victim, accompanied by a police officer as witness, went directly to the location Irlmaier described. They found exactly what he had seen: a wagon stacked with firewood, and beneath it, the stolen pipes hidden precisely where Irlmaier said they would be. The police files contain dozens of such cases. Families searching for missing relatives would show Irlmaier photographs, and he would describe their exact locations, sometimes alive in refugee camps, sometimes dead on distant battlefields. His accuracy rate in these documented cases exceeded 90%. But perhaps most importantly for understanding his World War III predictions, the police files show that Irlmaier never charged money for his services. He worked his regular job as a well digger and dowser, helping people find water sources for their farms, and provided his visions completely free of charge. This financial disinterest adds credibility to his predictions because he had no monetary motive to fabricate dramatic prophecies. He simply described what he claimed to see, whether people wanted to hear it or not. According to Stefan Bernth's exhaustive documentation, Alois Irlmaier has repeatedly and in practically all early records commented on 3 political assassinations in the run-up to the Third World War. The third assassination is supposed to be the signal for the outbreak of the Great War. The consistency of this prediction across multiple interviews spanning over a decade demonstrates that Irlmaier considered the assassination sequence fundamental to understanding how World War III would begin. In the earliest recorded interviews from 1950, he described the trigger mechanism. First, they'll kill the third, another high-ranking person. They've already killed 2. Over there, he'll die where the sun rises, and then it will break out overnight. Irlmaier was geographically specific about where this crucial assassination would occur. According to preserved transcripts, "I think it will be at the Balkans, but cannot say it exactly." He consistently returned to this geographic focus, stating that everything will start with murder in the Balkans. When questioned in 1959, the final year of his life, about whether he still believed in this prediction, Irlmaier's response was documented. "It hasn't changed in the slightest. It is only because it has come closer that I see it much more clearly. And the 2 men who killed the third high-ranking man, I see them too. They were paid by other people." He provided even more specific details about the assassins. One of the murderers is a small black man, the other a little bit taller, with bright-colored hair. This level of physical description suggests Irlmaier believed he was seeing actual future individuals rather than symbolic representations. What makes this prediction particularly significant is Irlmaier's insistence that the assassination wouldn't be a random act of political violence, but rather a carefully orchestrated murder designed to trigger the larger conflict that powerful interests were already planning. While the assassination would create international tensions, Irlmaier's most geographically specific prediction concerns the exact location where military action would begin. According to multiple documented sources, he repeatedly described seeing a strategic bridge that would become the focal point of the initial fighting. The preserved testimonies show Irlmaier described this critical infrastructure in consistent detail across years of interviews. He saw tensions focusing on crossing points between different spheres of influence, where East meets West in what he called eternal tension. One of the most specific documented predictions involves timing and location together. According to witness testimony preserved in Stefan Bernth's research, for the Speyer area, it is supposed to start between Irotontov and Tupon on Friday night. To a woman from Hockenheim, he said, "You have to sit on packed suitcases. When you hear it on the radio, you still have 20 minutes to get over the bridge, Rhine Bridge in Speyer. After that, it is too late." This extraordinarily specific warning suggests several things about Irlmaier's vision. First, he saw the conflict beginning at a strategic bridge location. Second, he believed the escalation would be so rapid that civilians would have only minutes to escape before the area became a war zone. Third, he expected the initial fighting to begin during nighttime hours on a Friday. Additional documented testimony records his geographic specificity. Immediately after the third murder, you have to get to the Rhine as quickly as possible, along the left bank of the Rhine on the road to Basel, to Lindau across Lake Constance. The Russian won't get to Lindau, but to Freiburg no further. According to one witness account, he took a map of Germany, didn't look at it when he spoke. I still remember today that I was startled, because he drew a straight line along the Rhine with his finger. What makes Irlmaier's war prediction militarily credible is his detailed description of how the conflict would escalate from initial incident to global warfare. The documented transcripts show he understood modern military logistics and alliance obligations with surprising sophistication for a village craftsman. According to preserved statements in multiple sources, thereafter 3 armored wedges immediately advance with lightning speed in the north of the Danube over West Germany towards the Rhine, without preliminary warning. This will occur so unexpectedly that the population flees full of panic to the west. Irlmaier's description of civilian panic and refugee chaos demonstrates understanding of how modern warfare affects non-combatant populations. Many cars will clog the roads. if they would have stayed at home or would not have used the main streets. Everything, which will be an obstacle for the rapidly advancing tanks on high-speed motorways and other fast motorways, will be down-rolled. The timing precision he consistently described across multiple interviews shows he saw this escalation following a specific sequence. The year before the war will be a fruitful year with much fruit and grain. After the murder of the third, it starts overnight. The war begins at sunrise. He comes along rapidly. His description of the conflict's beginning has an almost cinematic quality. The farmers sit in the pub playing cards, when the foreign soldiers look through the windows and doors. Quite black an army comes from the east, but however, everything occurs very rapidly. Irlmaier provided additional timeline specifics that suggest he saw the conflict unfolding according to precise scheduling. I see a 3, but I do not know if it means 3 days or 3 weeks. It comes from the Golden City. This combination of geographic specificity, timeline precision, and military logistics understanding creates a prediction that modern strategic analysts acknowledge follows realistic patterns of how contemporary conflicts could escalate through alliance systems and rapid deployment capabilities. One of Irlmaier's most tactically sophisticated predictions involves the specific invasion routes he described consistently across multiple documented interviews. According to preserved transcripts, I see 3 spearheads coming. The below spearhead comes along over the forest, but then pulls up itself northwestly alongside the Danube. The geographic precision of these military movements demonstrates knowledge that seems impossible for a village well-digger to possess. The line is, for instance, Prague, Bavarian forest and northwest. The blue water is the southern boundary. The second spearhead goes from east to west over Saxonia, the third from northeast to southwest. Stefan Bernth's research documents even more specific details from witness testimonies. The Russian is coming, A, the Ostmarkstraße, Regensburg, Nuremberg, Stuttgart, Karlsruhe, Approx, 5 Divisions B, the Autobahn to Frankfurt from Saxony, 15 Divisions C, Berlin, Hanover, Hamburg motorway. These aren't random military movements, but carefully planned strategic advances targeting specific objectives. Irlmaier understood the industrial significance of the targets. Day and night the Russians run. Inexorably, their target is the Ruhr district, where the many furnaces and fireplaces are. The Ruhr Valley's importance as Europe's industrial heartland makes it a logical military objective. But Irlmaier's strategic understanding went beyond obvious targets. He predicted specific limitations on the advance. The Russians won't get to Lindau, but as far as Freiburg, no further. The documented consequences he foresaw demonstrate the scale of destruction these military operations would cause. I cannot see any Danube bridges above Regensburg anymore. Hardly anything remains of the big city Frankfurt. The Rhine Valley will be devastated mainly by air. This level of tactical detail, combined with accurate understanding of strategic objectives and geographic constraints, creates a military scenario that defense analysts acknowledge follows coherent strategic logic. Among Irlmaier's most disturbing and specific predictions is his repeated description of a weapon he consistently called the yellow dust of death. The preserved transcripts from multiple independent sources record identical details about this devastating weapon system. According to documented statements, the airplanes drop a yellow powder between the Black Sea and the North Sea. Thus, a death strip is created, straight from the Black Sea to the North Sea, as wide as half Bavaria. In this zone, no more grass can grow, let alone humans live. The Russian supply is interrupted. What makes this prediction remarkable is that Irlmaier, speaking in the 1950s, described what appears to be enhanced radiation weapons or advanced chemical warfare agents that wouldn't be publicly acknowledged until decades later. His technical understanding of the weapon's effects suggests knowledge beyond what was available to civilians at the time. The documented details show Irlmaier understood both the delivery system and the specific effects. Here, the pilots also throw off their small black boxes. They do explode before they touch the soil and spread a yellow or green smoke or dust. What comes in contact with this becomes dead, whether it is a human, an animal, or a plant. His description of selective destruction, killing all living things while leaving buildings intact, perfectly matches the theoretical effects of enhanced radiation weapons. The cattle falls, the grass becomes yellow and dry. The dead humans will become quite yellow and black. The wind drives the clouds of death off to the east. Irlmaier also predicted environmental consequences that suggest understanding of radioactive contamination. The rivers will have so few water that you can easily pass them. This description of water source contamination aligns with effects of radiological weapons. The strategic purpose he described, creating an uninhabitable barrier to cut off advancing armies from their supply lines, demonstrates sophisticated understanding of how such weapons might be deployed in actual warfare scenarios. While focusing on European geography, Irlmaier's documented predictions consistently linked the global conflict to simultaneous Middle Eastern warfare. The preserved transcripts show he understood how regional conflicts would merge into comprehensive global war. According to multiple recorded statements, everything calls peace, Shalom. Then it will occur. A new Middle East war suddenly flames up. Big naval forces are facing hostility in the Mediterranean. The situation is strained, but the actual firing spark is set on fire in the Balkan. This prediction demonstrates understanding of how multiple regional tensions could interconnect through alliance systems and strategic competition. Irlmaier saw Middle Eastern conflict as simultaneous with, not separate from, the European warfare he described in detail. Witness testimony documented by Stefan Berndt provides additional specificity. According to A. Pollinger, interview 2014, Irlmaier actually spoke specifically about a conflict with active Israeli participation. It starts with the Jews and the Arabs. That's where it starts. The naval warfare component, he predicted, shows understanding of strategic waterways. Suddenly, a new conflict will break out in the Middle East, and significant naval forces will battle in the Mediterranean, tensing the worldwide situation. Additional documentation records his prediction of military movements connecting different theaters. Massed units march from the east into Belgrade and move forward to Italy. This suggests he saw coordinated operations across multiple fronts rather than separate regional conflicts. Father Norbert Bachmann's documentation, based on oral statements from Irlmaier, adds another dimension. Additionally, China, the Yellow Dragon, simultaneously invades Alaska and Canada. This global scope indicates Irlmaier understood the conflict would involve all major powers simultaneously. According to documented interviews, Irlmaier predicted specific patterns of American military involvement that would ultimately prove decisive in ending the European conflict. The preserved transcripts show he understood transatlantic logistics and strategic capabilities with remarkable accuracy. Multiple sources record his prediction about timing. American forces would come across the Great Water, but would arrive too late to prevent the terrible destruction in Europe. This suggests he saw initial European defeat followed by massive American counter-deployment. Father Norbert Bachmann's documentation, based on conversations with Irlmaier, provides additional details. The United States, on the opposite side of the Atlantic, provides the response right away. On the European front, the U.S. Air Force has a sizable aircraft deployment. The transcripts preserve Irlmaier's prediction about American use of the devastating weapon he repeatedly described. Additionally, they fire a few boxes, which upon detonation spread a yellow powder across a huge area between the Black Sea and the North Sea. This indicates he saw American forces deploying the yellow dust weapon system as a desperate measure to halt advancing armies that couldn't be stopped through conventional warfare. The geographic specificity between the Black Sea and the North Sea matches his other descriptions of creating an uninhabitable barrier. According to preserved statements, this American intervention would prove successful, but would come at enormous cost. Everyone, every animal, and every plant that comes into contact with this dust perishes. The documentation shows Irlmaier understood this would represent escalation to weapons of mass destruction, used not for conquest, but for creating strategic barriers to halt unstoppable conventional advances. Beyond military conflict, Irlmaier's documented predictions include massive geophysical events that would permanently reshape European geography. According to preserved transcripts from multiple sources, a single airplane which comes from the east throws something into the large water. Then the water lifts itself as high as a tower and falls down. Everything is inundated. The geographic specificity of these predictions suggests Irlmaier saw deliberate targeting of geological formations to trigger natural disasters. There is an earthquake. The southern part of England slips into the water. 3 large cities will be ruined. One will be destroyed by the water. The second is located so high in the sea that you can only see the church tower, and the third falls in. Additional documentation records broader geographic changes. The islands before the coast sink because the water is quite wild. I see large holes in the sea which will be filled when the enormous waves return. The beautiful city at the Blue Sea sinks almost completely in the sea and in the dirt and sand which the sea ejects. The timeline he provided suggests these environmental catastrophes would coincide with military operations. The whole action will not last long. I see 3 lines, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. I don't know exactly, but it won't last long. What makes these predictions particularly significant is that Irlmaier, speaking in the 1950s, described what appears to be deliberate triggering of geological instabilities as a warfare technique. Modern research into tectonic weapons and earthquake generation wasn't publicly acknowledged until decades later. The documentation shows he understood these geographic changes would be permanent. One part of England disappears when the thing falls into the sea, which the pilot drops. Then the water lifts itself as high as a tower and falls down. Among Irlmaier's most consistent and detailed predictions is what he called the 3 days of darkness, a period that would mark the end of active warfare and the beginning of recovery. The documentation shows this prediction remained constant across all interviews spanning over a decade. According to preserved transcripts, do not open a window during the 72 hours. The rivers will have so few water that you can easily pass them. The cattle falls, the grass becomes yellow and dry, the dead humans will become quite yellow and black. The survival instructions he provided demonstrate he considered this period survivable for those who followed specific precautions. Do not go out of the house, do not look out of the windows, and keep the candlelight burning, and pray. Overnight, there will die more humans than in the 2 world wars before. Multiple sources document his insistence that this darkness would have supernatural elements. The wind drives the clouds of death off to the east. He repeatedly stated that during this period, only blessed candles will give light, while all electrical systems would fail. Documentation confirms the timing significance. Irlmaier said the war will stop when the 3 days of total darkness happen throughout the earth. This suggests he saw this period as the definitive end of global military operations rather than their continuation. The atmospheric phenomena he described align with effects of massive atmospheric disruption. Environmental consequences of the weapon systems he predicted would create dust clouds that would circle the globe and block sunlight for exactly 72 hours. The consistency of these survival instructions across all documented interviews suggests Irlmaier considered this information crucial for anyone hoping to survive the global catastrophe he foresaw. According to extensive documentation, Irlmaier predicted that external military conflict would be accompanied by internal social breakdown and revolutionary upheaval across Europe. The preserved statements show he understood how war would trigger domestic instability. Multiple sources record his specific prediction about Paris. The large city with the high iron tower is on fire, but this has been done by the own people, not by those which came from the east. And I can exactly see that the city is made equal to the ground. This indicates he saw French revolutionary violence, not foreign military action, as the cause of Paris's destruction. The documentation shows he predicted similar internal chaos across Europe. And in Italy it is going wildly too. They kill many people there, and the Pope flees, but many clergymen will be killed, many churches collapse. The sequence leading to revolution was documented in his 1950 interview with Maria Luisa Bender. First comes prosperity like never before. Then there is a decline in faith like never before. Then an unprecedented corruption of morals. Then a large number of strangers, foreigners, come to the country. Inflation is high. The money is losing value more and more. The revolution soon follows. His prediction about Russia shows similar patterns. In Russia, a revolution breaks out and a civil war. The corpses are so much that you cannot remove them off the roads anymore. But Irlmaier also predicted spiritual renewal following the chaos. The cross comes to honors anew. The Russian people believe in God anew. The large ones among the party leaders commit suicide, and in the blood the great gulati is washed off. The documentation preserves his vision of religious revival. Then they sing the Easter song and burn candles in front of sacral pictures. By the prayer of the Christianity, the monster of hell dies. Also, the young people believe anew in the intercession of the God's Mother. One of the most striking aspects of Irlmaier's documented predictions is how precisely they describe current global economic conditions as precursors to the conflict he foresaw. The interview with Maria Louise Bender from 1950 reads like a description of contemporary economic instability. The documented sequence he provided: first comes prosperity like never before, followed by high inflation, where the money is losing value more and more, describes the exact pattern many economists now identify in current global conditions. His prediction about international trade tensions proves remarkably prescient. Current economic analysis acknowledges that when the Chinese become rich and challenge the Americans for control of world trade, exactly the dynamic Irlmaier described 70 years ago. The documentation shows he understood how economic instability would trigger political upheaval. When oil becomes so expensive that it threatens the prosperity of nations, and when nations owe more than they can ever repay, both conditions clearly visible in current global economics. Irlmaier's prediction about currency instability has achieved disturbing accuracy. People will have paper, but it will not buy what they need. Nations will blame each other for their poverty. This describes current concerns about inflation, currency devaluation, and international economic tensions. The timeline he provided suggests these economic preconditions would be followed rapidly by conflict. This economic collapse will make people desperate and willing to follow leaders who promise easy solutions. Modern economic analysis confirms that current global debt levels, inflation concerns, and currency instabilities match Irlmaier's described preconditions with uncomfortable precision. In his final documented statements before death in 1959, Irlmaier provided cryptic numerical references that researchers continue analyzing for timing clues about his predicted conflict. According to preserved transcripts, I see quite clearly 3 numbers, 2 8s and a 9. But I cannot say what it means and cannot state a time. The consistency with which he returned to specific numbers across multiple interviews suggests he believed these numerical patterns were significant for understanding when his predictions would unfold. However, he consistently admitted inability to decode their temporal meaning. When pressed about seasonal timing, the documentation records his response. When we asked him when the Great Wash-Up would take place, Irlmaier answered evasively at first. But then, and he did this in verse, he said, "When the leaves change color. It can be in autumn. It can be in spring. I just see white on the trees. But it can be flowers and it can be snow. It's certainly not in summer." This seasonal specificity, ruling out summer while remaining uncertain between spring and autumn, suggests he saw the conflict beginning during transitional seasons when white on trees could represent either snow or blossoms. His final interviews preserved additional timing references. I see a 3, but I do not know if it means 3 days or 3 weeks. It comes from the Golden City. The mysterious Golden City reference appears in multiple contexts, but without clear geographical identification. The transcripts preserve his increasing certainty about proximity as he aged. It is only because it has come closer that I see it much more clearly. This suggests he believed the events he described were approaching within his lifetime or shortly after. The numerical mysteries he left behind continue to intrigue researchers, seeking to decode potential timing patterns in his remarkably detailed predictions. Modern analysis reveals disturbing alignment between Irlmaier's 1950s predictions and current global conditions across multiple domains. According to recent assessments, all of Irlmaier's prophecies are already happening. Post-World War II opulence came, as well as the 60s sexual revolution and the wave of Muslim immigration to Europe. And then the inflation, revolution, and war. The economic preconditions he described have materialized with mathematical precision. His prediction of unprecedented prosperity, followed by currency instability and international tensions over trade and resources, now dominates global headlines daily. Current geopolitical analysis acknowledges the alliance trap he predicted. European unity and tensions. The unity of Europe is crucial in facing geopolitical challenges posed by Russia or other global actors. However, internal tensions within Europe could weaken this unity, potentially leading to conflicts similar to those foreseen by Irlmaier's prophecies. The Middle Eastern component he consistently emphasized has achieved prominence. The tensions between the United States and its allies against Russia and China and its allies have been increasing. Ukraine's invasion by Russia is for some the commencement of the Third World War. His prediction about assassination triggering broader conflict resonates with current understanding of how alliance systems could transform regional incidents into global wars. NATO Article 5 obligations create exactly the type of escalation mechanism Irlmaier described. The technological capabilities he predicted, precision weapons, real-time battlefield surveillance, rapid military deployment, are now standard features of modern warfare that didn't exist when he made his predictions. Perhaps most unsettling is how his described economic sequence, prosperity, inflation, social upheaval, international blame, desperate leadership, matches current patterns across multiple nations simultaneously. Stefan Berndt, who conducted the most comprehensive research into Irlmaier's predictions, concluded, "I can say that Alois Irlmaier is the best seer in Europe for the last 400 years, and that his predictions still have significance into the present." Whether you believe in prophecy or not, the documented accuracy of Alois Irlmaier's World War III predictions demands serious consideration. His statements were recorded by multiple independent sources, preserved in official archives, and verified through his demonstrated accuracy regarding previous conflicts. The bridge he saw, the assassination he predicted, the alliance obligations he said would drag nations into unwanted war, the economic instabilities he described as precursors, the three-day escalation sequence. All the pieces are now visible on the global stage. The question isn't whether we should believe in prophecy. The question is whether understanding his detailed warnings might help us recognize the patterns he saw so clearly, and perhaps still avoid the future he described with such terrifying precision.